Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Barbara.
Me. We're going to start, as we usually do, with the question. Does anybody have any questions? Any comments? Any thoughts from things that have been happening in your lives personally that will benefit us outside of you or in your community? Any ideas, any thoughts, any comments?
Good morning, Barbara. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, George.
Yeah, well, two words came to my mind, in reference to me just thinking about, what, Brother Ron put out there in the macro, and that's just to be awakened. I think we spoke a lot, in reference to Adam, and, I think that we're truly blessed, just to be able to have the opportunity, for this time together. So just to be awakened was just something that was on my spirit. I just wanted to share this morning. I'm done.
Thanks for that observation. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Well, what George just said kind of leads into something that I'd like to facilitate a discussion on. I don't remember if it was Kathy with a C or Angela or whomever, several sessions ago, asked Pastor the question, what does it mean to be woke? And I think, Pastor, you related it to being aware. But part of that awareness is looking to the government to respond to and meet the need of that awareness, potentially, for some people. When we talk about being awakened, being woke, it is just as George has said. We've opened up to the knowledge and understanding that we are Elohim and we are one and many at the same time. And remember, in the spiritual, there are no dualities. One thing can be itself and many others at the same time. So based on that, I started talking about woke. And then I went back to the scripture that talked about yoke. Woke and yoke is what we're going to see if we can shed some light. Well, no, we're gonna as a group open this up and shed some light on it today. The concepts of being we've already talked about woke. I'd like to talk a little bit more about yoke this morning. And the basic verse that I'm going to use is Matthew 28:30. Although there's so many others that talk about yokeness and being yoked. But I'm gonna. The beauty of the scriptures is that they can reveal themselves in so many different ways. I'm just going to take it from one perspective today. And what I trust is that what will open in you are other ways that the same scripture can be open and reveal the light in it. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah,
ma'am.
Thank you. Let's go to Matthew 11:28 through 30. And it reads, and of course this is Jesus talking. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Alrighty. The question I have relates to what is a yoke? And when you think about a yoke, and when you think about this scripture, what do you generally think about when you think about something being yoked? That's not rhetorical.
My thoughts are being connected to something, or being connected to someone.
Thank you. Others?
Or for the purpose of shared labor, or whatever.
Can it also be describing balance?
Yeah. Anybody else? Ron, you get to it early.
Barbara, I was thinking restrain.
As if restrain.
Restrain. You're being held back.
Okay. That's another way to look at it.
Something.
Something oppressive is or something burdensome.
Yes.
Okay.
Controlled.
Controlled. And is it possible that folk, particularly in Eastern countries where marriages are arranged, can potentially see that that contract or that marriage, that they might be chained together by that marriage or yoked together by that marriage before they really understand what they're getting into?
It implies, though, that you are going to be yoked to something. You're going to be controlled, or something is going to be a burden or weigh you down. And maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but he's saying rather than let that be life itself or things that happen to you in your natural sense, look at what I'm offering so that this doesn't destroy you or take you down. Am I looking at that right? Because it almost sounds like it's implying that this is something is going to be around your neck anyway. Something is going to get your attention anyway, to be a weight.
Or is already getting your attention. It's already around your neck. You're already feeling the weight. You're already feeling the burden. You're already feeling the oppression. You're already feeling the constraint. You're already feeling the connection, whatever that is. So the first use of, I don't want to go there yet.
Okay.
Paul even talked about, go ahead.
Before you go forward, as I think about yoke and I look at it, he is talking also to the perspective of someone that's not necessarily aware, or have full awareness of who and what he is. And so it's as if they are on the outside trying to look in. And so what they're actually perceiving Jesus going through at this moment does look like a burden, and I see slavery. I see something that is Jews put about cattle to control them around their necks, and et cetera. And considering how Jesus was viewed from their current perspective, that would look like that, and therefore it would automatically look unpleasant for me to follow behind this man, to join myself with him. This man is clearly being persecuted, and everyone hates him. So that would be a tall order, so to speak. So I think he's trying to talk to them or speak to them from their current viewpoint, where they currently are, and how they view. I don't know if you want to say his mission, his role, his plight, but what it is that he's about, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say that in Corinthians it talks about being unequally yoked as well in connection with say a partnership between believers and unbelievers is one way to look at it. But I want to. Are there any other comments right now? Because I want to go into what Sheldon just opened up. Let's talk about what a yoke is generally, as it relates to this metaphor or this picture that's given to us in Matthew. So, a yoke is a sort of a circular wooden halter on the neck of these oxen, and it settles. Usually, it's oxen with horn because it can settle right behind the horns, and there's a strap that comes under the animal's chin. There's a beam that goes across both animals side by side, but in the middle is what links them together, and they are used to pull the plow or whatever is being pulled. It can be wood, even now in parts of Palestine and Syria and all over the world. Oxen are still used to be beasts of burdens in a sense. Let me clear this phone so that I won't get that noise anymore. Thank you. So what's usually done, generally, is that there is an oxen that's more experienced, more mature than the one that's yoked to it. And it could be larger or not, but the one that's yoked to it begins to learn how to be that beast of burden, or how to pull that load along with the more mature oxen. An ox can be either a bull or a cow. It can be both. But generally, if it's a bull, it's castrated when it gets to be about 5 years old, which I thought was kind of interesting. But you can yoke together masculine and feminine cows. But the bull is called an oxen. They are called an oxen once that bull is castrated. So the other thing about yokes is that it's got to be shaped so that it goes over the horns of the animal, which means then that as the animal grows, there may need to be some refining and some reshaping of that yoke so that it fits properly. Because if it doesn't fit properly, it can be very uncomfortable and or either injure the animal. Again, an experienced oxen is paired with a younger or an inexperienced one to train it. I think that's all I want to say about that. Let's see if anybody has any other comments about just what yokeness is.
Hey, good morning. When we talk about yoke and we talk about the experience and the inexperience, one thing that I learned this week by way of friendship or a close friend of mine And what he instills in his family is help me help you. And I like that. So instilling that in his family, he's the experienced one. And the other members of the household, they inexperienced. But he letting them know, help me help you. Go ahead and fill the application out for the scholarship. If you don't get it, at least you did something. Yet if you do get it, you help the household out. So in being yoked, I just like the phrase of help me help you, as it relates to one form of entity having experience, wisdom, or understanding, and another form of entity who has wisdom, has understanding, but not to the degree of the other person. So that's how I look at it.
Thank you, George, for that comment. That is another way to see it, and it's going to be intertwined in what we actually get to, I think, as we unfold the lesson today. It's a little bit off-putting, if that's a word, because I'm talking to a lot of you who already have who already woke in a sense. But bear with me because we are going somewhere with this, as Pastor usually says. So, all right, let's go back then to Matthew 11, 28 through 30. We already talked about yokeness, and we talked a little bit about the physical yoke that we are envisioning when we see these verses. And the verse reads again.
Barbara, can I ask something before you go any further? Barbara?
You certainly can.
I just want to say, can yoke also means that it has something to do with controlling? Did I miss that part or something?
Yes, I think Beth or someone did say, yes, yoke does mean controlling.
Okay.
It can mean
okay.
that as well.
Okay, I missed that part. I'm sorry.
There are so many different ways that you can think of yoke, like controlling, oppressive, burdensome, training, all of those things.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let's go back to anybody else. Let's go back to Matthew then.
I would say one,
go ahead, Cheryl.
But hopefully is not going too far. And I would see, as hearing everything was said and looking at it deeply, yoke is to align, to come in alignment with, to align oneself with. That's all.
Say that again, Cheryl.
You said say that again. Yoke means to align with, or to align yourself with, and I'm trying not to hold off, Barbara, in saying anything else. But even in what we're about to go over, will point into that direction in the way that Jesus is using it here.
Okay, to come in alignment with then. Mm-hmm. All right. To step with, to walk with, to that kind of alignment kind of thing.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. And I think we're talking from a deeper standpoint, and we're going to go, I'm waiting for us to stop, and so we can go into what that actually means, not just saying align, but to actually talk about what this alignment means. So that's why I'm stopping there. Tease away.
Okay. So it's almost like I got you yoked in the starting, and you ready to go. You ready to go already.
Yes.
All right, so let's go. Let's go. Matthew 11, 28, 30. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden. I'm reading it again. and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in the heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Another reading from the Message says this: Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Shall I do it? Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. So, let's look at some of these words in here. And Shell, you can fill in also from your perspective because you have ready access to Aramaic. But let's break this down before we get into my supposition about this scripture. It says, I will give you rest. Come unto me. I will give you rest. Are you tired? You worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Rest in this perspective has to do with I don't know how if the calm beyond time and space. There's a calmness beyond time and space. If that resonates, it's not that I'm out of breath and I just need to sit down for a minute, or I'm so burdened down with this or that, and I just need a break. Rest implies, in terms of a calmness beyond time and space and motion, that regardless of the circumstances that I am in, or regardless of the circumstances that surround me, that I can find this calmness, this place beyond space and time, where I can step out of myself in a sense, out of my physical in a sense, and wherever that is, regardless of the storm that's going on around me, I can still be at peace. I can still be at rest. Does that resonate? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Anybody has anything else? We're trying to break these words down now so that they mean something, and so that we begin to have this dance with our soul, in a sense, by having these chords resonate beyond the box that we usually, the physical box that we usually put these words in. That we begin to have a strumming of those chords, a resonance of those chords with our very souls.
Yes.
So go ahead, Shel.
One of the Aramaic versions is, "Come unto me, all the weary and carrying burdens, and I will ease you." And the "I will ease you" part actually adds a sense of when you think of rest. Rest usually means more so of kind of like, I guess, just being idle and not necessarily as much as of movement. More so kind of like, in a moment of non-action. In a certain case, in some senses, "I will ease you" is something that is denotes a little bit more to moving forward. So as you go on, so to speak. So it's as if it is continuous rest, or a more continuous state of rest as you proceed. And I will ease you.
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else? It's almost suggesting you're going to get this relief and this refreshment as you go forward.
Yes.
The other idea of rest, before we go on to the next word, is that beyond time and space and motion, is this place where it's a dimension of perhaps infinite stillness, and you can cleanse yourself and purify yourself of all of these negative thoughts you might have had. You drop them behind you as you get to this place beyond time and space. All those negative energies we accumulate, all of that just drops away. It doesn't matter what the work was. When I am in this place of rest, I am refreshed and replenished and relieved.
Another thought. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Another thought as well, as I look at the words that are used in both cases, believe and go back, at least in the literal translation, not the Aramaic, laboring, burden, and rest. Those are alluding more so to, in some ways, physical activity or work. Like I'm thinking of like hard labor or something of that nature. And looking at it from the Aramaic, all the weary and carrying burdens, and I will ease you. This, in today's context, deals more with mental health or the soul in the way one is living. And this isn't just, it isn't just pointing to a physical thing. It is speaking towards that weary soul, the soul that is heavy carrying burdens. I'm going to make it easy for your soul having rest. That's what the Aramaic more so seems to be pointing towards here. Not talking about, oh, I can't stand that job that I work so hard on, but this actually is dealing with this. Like I said, this is dealing with the individual from a more deeper standpoint.
Thanks so much for that observation, because that is what we're at, with so much mental anguish that in this realm right now, much more so at one time with all of the deaths and all of the mental anguish of not only did I lose, quote unquote lose, not only did a loved one or two or three or four or five no longer with me, I don't have a job anymore. I have a family. I have children to feed. I have my wife to take care of. I have to put a roof over their heads. There is lots of mental anguish from all aspects right now. And so, yes, indeed, this refers also more so to our mental anguish, because the battle is in our minds, is it not? How we form our responses and how we look at things begin there before they ever begin to manifest in terms of what we do to address them, what we do as a response to them. So, but you're right. Right now is a period where we're not even talking about my work was hard today and I need to take a break, or I ran that marathon. That is not what I'm talking about. The marathon that people are running today is that mental marathon, the anguish, I got to get through this. I know I can get through this. I have to do this for my family and for myself, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's in a sense what we were talking about when we're saying, okay, chill out. That's what Yahshua is saying. Just listen, bring it down. I can give you that rest. Just listen to me, open to me, come to me. I'll begin to show you how you can have that rest even in the midst of all of this anguish, everything that's going on. Other comments?
That's pretty interesting to me, and that shines a different light on it that I guess I had not seen before. So in a sense, what I hear you and Sheldon saying is mentally, spiritually, if you don't know how to handle the stress that you see, whether it is physical or the anguish that goes on in this world, your body is a magnet to hold that pain if you don't know how to purge it or to know how to release it some way or turn it around into positive energy. It becomes a burden too, because you're absolutely right. He this sounds like a physical kind of thing he's saying, and I'm sure that's no coincidence. So I guess I just hadn't seen it quite that way. But am I right in seeing that we hold so much in, and the pains and the things that you have that you see aren't necessarily from the physical labor that you're doing, but from all this stuff that you hold inside of you because you don't know how to purge it or what to do with it.
That's exactly right, Ron. Every thought has its own energy. Every thought has its own energy. And so whatever the thought is, whatever it is that we're holding in us, has the capacity to free us or to put us in bond, depending on where we are in terms of our spiritual awareness.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So is that more prevalent? And I know when I give myself the most grief for, it's like when you make a mistake. So the mental aspect of when you think you're headed on one course or you're trying to do something and you don't get that outcome, and you just you make a mistake and you reflect on what went wrong, why did you make that mistake, and it seems like in the bigger picture, we try to live so cautiously, or we try to live such a mistake-free life that you beat yourself up when you do make that mistake and wondering how things went that direction. And I think so that's a part of the individual battle of trying to live with your mistakes and trying to realize that you are actually bigger than the mistake, and everything's an opportunity for growth. But at the time that it happens, or bad things happen, or things don't work out the way that we thought they should, we try to reflect and go back to, retrace our steps, and you just kind of beat yourself up. And I know I had to learn over the years that what's done is done, and there's a lesson in it for you. But I think the mental anguish of going back when you've you've had the best intentions, but you still made mistakes to put yourself. And so I think for an individual standpoint, spiritually, that's a part of the struggle.
Is this S?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean, you're right in there with what where I'm going with this is the fact that we can put our own selves in bondage in a sense by overthinking, by feeling the guilt, blah 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 blah, so I don't want to go into any detail, but I'm going to say yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly at this point. Okay. The word meek, we've talked about what it means. I'm meek and lowly. I am meek. what Yahshua says here is that I am meek and lowly in heart. Meekness has to do with, from this perspective, strength with gentleness. Remember, we're beyond the duet. We're trying to not box things in with you either this or you either that. Meekness, oh, you let people walk all over you. That's what it means to be meek. To be lowly means you let people walk all over you, step all over you, and you're their doormat. No, that's coming from the realm of this realm, the ego realm. And it puts its own labels around these kinds of things. This is not what Yahshua is talking about. Yahshua is opening it up. When you look at things from the spiritual perspective, there are limitless possibilities of what we can define and see. And lowliness and meekness has more to do with strength with gentleness. Understanding we are nothing apart from our womb. Understanding that when we align ourselves and we understand that we are one with our womb, that meekness has to do with strength with gentleness. I don't have to show you that I'm stronger than you. I can show you that I'm stronger than you in my gentleness, with how I respond to you, what I say to you, how I treat you. It's reliant on our womb. It's complete willingness to trust and follow. It's the condition of a person's heart, the characteristic of a person's heart, where that individual is exercising the strength of God rather than one's own strength, or rather than being defined externally by the realm we live in, the reality realm we live in. That meekness is not strength, but it is strength. It's strength with gentleness. Can anybody else, any other teacher, help me give a sense of what that means?
Yes.
From your perspective as well.
With meek, and I guess our sense of it today, we usually look at it as someone being weak, not very strong, someone that just lays down, etc. Of course, we look at it from meek from the standpoint of physical strength and being able to oppose our will upon something. And what Jesus is talking about here with meek has to deal with love and peace. It's not thinking of in the perspective of being weak at all. His more so. So when you're using power over something, you are essentially, like I said, forcing your will upon that thing. And enforcing your will upon that thing is almost as if you take away the power, you usurp the power from that thing and you force it to your will. With the love and peace aspect, Jesus is not saying that I'm going to make you do something. It is more so of come and join me and do this together, is more of an invitation and a welcoming, if you will, but not forcing you to do it, which is also is showing, in a sense, a respect as well.
I guess I agree with that. I see meekness as almost a super strength. I mean, it's a strength beyond anything physical, and I also see it as a choice that you make. It's easy to fly off the handle or to be out of control or be responsive to everything that is said. I was talking to a young lady the other day who yesterday, as a matter of fact, who got into it with her boyfriend. And she came to me after the argument and she said, "Why does he always push my buttons?" I said, "Because you let him. Why do you respond every time he says something?" And she still didn't get what I was saying. I mean, meekness is a strength that you make a decision to be. And it may even be something that you have to arrive to through practice and wisdom show it to you. So when I think of that, I also think of having wisdom and knowing, making a choice as to if I'm speaking or my actions are necessary, and can they bring enlightenment or understanding to what is taking place in front of me.
Thank you, Sheldon and Ron, for your comments. Any others?
Yeah, and also, Barbara, when we speak about meek, in the Aramaic, there's a scripture, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." But in the word meek, it speaks about blessed are those who have softened their rigidity within. And so when we, come to that true knowledge of who we are, from the inside out, we're able to, soften up those hardened thoughts that we have because we know we are loved. And so, blessed are those who have softened, that rigidity, within. Because if there's no enemy within, there's nothing that can really harm you on the outside. That's just a thought I wanted to share.
Thanks, George. So you're somewhere along, I got you, Pastor, we're along the line where Sheldon was coming from, where the rigidity is what you're talking about, whereas an animal is forced to do a certain type of work. The work is there to do, and there's someone in control who puts the animals together. Whereas the reality, what Jesus is saying is, yeah, it is your choice to come to you. The work is going to be done, but you can choose to do it with me or not. Pastor.
I see it as being Jesus saying, listen, as you said, the work is going to be done. However, you can do it the hard way, or you can do it the way that I'm going to teach you. What Jesus is saying is, Ron was talking about the buttons being pushed. Jesus is saying that you can continue to allow your buttons to be pushed and struggle through it, or you can learn that you don't have to fight every battle. Jesus is making it's saying to us that there are different ways. For example, you can be on the line on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and you can, through your desires, bring about change with humanity. Or you can run for the office and go argue with the government that's not going to change anything. And you might get some tidbits here and there. However, if you do it the way that I'm teaching you, you will get it. You'll get it done, not in the manner, and not at the time you think, but it will be done before you even recognize it. What am I saying? Jesus is saying that follow me, walk with me. I will teach you step by step. However, we have been taught that get on your knees and pray and come to the altar and pray again. Then go back home and get on your knees and pray some more. And then come back to the altar next week and pray again. Nothing changes. There is the way to get the change done is to learn not only who you are, but also learn how to function in this realm being who you are, if that makes sense. I'm done.
That resonates. Thanks so much. So we talked about the scripture itself a little bit. We tried. Go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead.
Before we go any further, I'd also wanted to mention, along with a few things that were said just now, that it says from the Aramaic conversion, I am quiet and I am mild, denoting the idea of that ease once again, versus contrary to or contrasting actually fighting or a battle, so to speak, and having to use force, which is something that those who were weary and carrying burdens were actually doing before, was something that was more so fighting, even if it was an internal fighting. Just wanted to add that part.
And what you just said is that there's this seeming difference between the way the fight is done, except that the one that is not overt and physical is the one that's most powerful and manifests itself in more powerful ways. And that's the nuance there.
And going back, go ahead.
Go ahead. I have to go give an example. Go ahead, Sheila. I'll do it.
Only thing I was going to do is tie that a little bit to what T said a little while ago, when he gave the example of being hard on himself and everything. And what going back to verse 28, Jesus is not just talking about hard labor. He is addressing all of us as our entire being, I would say. So like body, mind, and spirit. And that which ST described as being very hard at first, and then growing through it, and then having a different understanding or perspective of it in hindsight, being able to see the situation differently, is what Jesus is speaking to and trying to offer. But he is expediting that process by you taking on his yoke. I'm trying to stop at 29, Barbara, and
try hard.
and basically, that's what he's basically talking about up until this point. He is that which ST mentioned. He is trying to bring that without all the fight to get to that particular point. Done.
Thanks, Pastor.
Yeah, it's like the meekness of it. I remember when I was in ninth grade, I had an English teacher, and I had gotten in her class late a couple of mornings, and she said something to me, but very soft-spoken lady, extremely nice, and I yelled at her. And after lunch, we're doing lunch, I went back to her class to apologize. And I'm not going to lie to you, I went back to apologize because I thought about she going to call my mama. But when I got back in the room to apologize to her, she said to me, I am so glad you came back. She said, because I had failed you for the whole semester. Come look. She said, remember this. The pen is mightier than the sword. And then she started erasing what she had written in her book. And that stuck with me because she never raised her voice at me. Her temperament never changed. She was always the same, but she always got the job done. Whether it was teaching you or disciplining you, her approach was always the same. And to me, the concept of meekness is not so much changing your demeanor as much as it is maybe voice inflection, so that you can discipline just as easy as you can teach. And what happens as a result of that, there is such an intertwining of teaching and discipline until you cannot distinguish the difference between the two, but at the same time, you embrace both of them without the person who is giving you that having to struggle to make sure you receive it, if that makes sense.
That resonates so much with me, because what it says to me is that both of her approaches are equally effective in terms of the message it wants to get out, without beating you about the head. But it's sort of like it's at a spiritual realm. In essence, is what it is. She's there to provide what's needed, when it's needed, how it's needed. If it's correction, if it's teaching, it doesn't matter, and it's given in the same from the same place. And when it's given from internal, from the spirit, it's equally effective. I don't know. That just really resonated with me. All right. After what we've been talking about, here's my supposition. There are so many ways that you could look at this verse, as you all have just, with all of your comments have shown, that the verse could be a metaphor for so many things. It could be a metaphor for the yoking together of your higher and your lower self. It could be a metaphor for, being free from, say, the yoke of the kingdom of man versus the yoke being free in the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. It can be a metaphor for being free from the yoke of religion and being yoked with the freedom of spirituality and knowing who you are and the oneness of who you are in the kingdom of heaven. There's so many ways to look at this. I want to take one of these ways and look at it a little bit more, though. One of the ways is looking at this from the perspective of the yoke of the ego being yoked with the soul. Is everybody following me? The ego being yoked with the soul. Let's just say this. For example, let's say the person plowing with the ox is you, me. One of the oxen represents our ego. The other represents our soul. The question is, which is the mature, experienced oxen? We talked about being woke, and you can be woke and ready to begin the journey, to experience what truths will open up to you, but not be there yet. But you're awoke and you're ready to receive. That's one type of thing. And then you can be woke to the point that you see that the yoke that you thought was keeping you constrained and keeping you bound and keeping you burdening you and keeping you in guilt because you're second guessing yourself, is not that yoke at all. It's a yoke that frees you to see the limitless opportunities that are available to you, the limitless solutions that are available to any problem that you might come up with. And so that's what I wanted us to look at for a second. We're that person, and we've yoked together the ego and the soul. So, next question is then, what is the ego? Because we can still be woke and still unequally yoked, particularly if the ego seems to be controlling the soul. What is the ego? I can share with you what Freud said the ego was, and then we'll look at the spiritual meaning of what the ego really is. Freud was this guy who in the night. Everybody still with me? Hello,
Yes.
hello.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Freud is this guy who is a neurologist, a psychologist who lived in, and he proposed this construct, this definition of in the 20s of how we see the world and how we interact with it. And he talked about the id, the ego, and the superego. And he talked about the id being the root of it's the root of all of our psychic energy. He talked about it being basically reacting to instincts and primitive needs like our hunger, our food, need for food, sex drive, our aggressive kind of self, and it operates on the pleasure principle. And anything that gives me pleasure, I'm down for it. Anything that gives me pleasure for me, I'm down for it. Exclusively for me, I'm down for it. Our decisions are made according to that. We want instant gratification. We see evidence of that even in this realm today, that people are acting from that id kind of persona more so than anything else. Well, everything is about me, myself, and I. Okay, so the ego is developed from the id. It's part of the personality as well, but it's responsible for dealing with reality. It helps us deal with this quote unquote this physical realm. And what it does is it has the capacity to take the pros and the cons of situations and to weigh those and not act on impulse necessarily, which is what the pleasure principle, the id, would do. I want it, it's there, I'm taking it, it's mine. That's what the id would do. The ego says, well, hey, back up, let's think about this for a minute. Whose is it? Will they take some money for it? Do you really want it right now? Do you really need it right now? Blah, 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 blah. So it exists according to this reality principle to measure those pros and cons and to measure the costs and the benefits before doing something. Everybody still with me? Yes, no? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody's still with me. And then there's the superego. This is the part about personality that deals with morals and ethics. It's where, as talked about when he was talking about, when you do something and maybe there was another way, a better way you could have done it, and you go back and you start judging whether or not I could not have done that better. Well, this is the part that the superego plays. It's our home for the sense of right and wrong, if you will, that we get from our family members. It's our morals. It's our sense of morals and our ethics that we get from the community. We get from our caregivers. We get from family. We get from society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that part of us develops around 5 years old, where we begin to know the difference between right and wrong. And so the superego helps us keep those other fellows in check. It just helps. It just helps to us to be our best possible self. Is another way to say that. And so the conscious is the gatekeeper that kind of it's a gatekeeper that keeps us in check against our worst behaviors. It's just, and if we cross it, we have the sense of guilt. We have the sense of shame. We have the sense of remorse. So all of these things have it's what Freud says has something to do with the way we relate to the world. And they all seem separate, but they are the same. They are not separate entities. All right. So taking that, looking at that, the id, I want it because I want it when I want it, pleasure. The ego, wait a minute, let's see, let's weigh the pros and the cons. Let's look at the costs and the benefits. The superego, okay, there's a right way to do this, and you got to do it right, or you're gonna. There's judgment in your decision making is what the superego brings to the table. So my question now to the group is, all right, that's the way Freud saw it. Looking at the way we relate, what from the spiritual and perspective, what is the ego? We're saying that the ego and our soul are the oxen that are yoked together to accomplish whatever the mission is, whatever the work is, and we are the driver of those things. We supposedly have control over the ego and the soul. So what is the ego?
I do think that ego will give you some definition to your character. And it can give you some intel on other people as it relates to their ego. If how you maneuver is going to have some impact on your ego, or your ego going to have some impact on your maneuver. So I'm just saying ego can give you a lot. It's going to describe your character or my character. And when you're dealing with individuals, it's going to tell you a lot about how they maneuver. When Reverend Richard states, if you want to see how this man going to treat you, see how he treat the women in his life. A little bit of that is ego. How he treats the women in his life. That's not saying that he can treat the women good and disregard his father and uncle and stuff. But how your ego is shaped and molded, it tells people a lot about you. That fair to say, Ms. Barbara, or not fair to say, or what?
All right. Thank you, George. The ego does say something about our character. Anyone else? When we looking at the ego versus the soul, the ego is the one that's coming from that selfish motivation. It's coming from our selfish, our reactive consciousness. Yes.
I had not thought about this as from the perspective you're bringing up, the yoking the ego and the soul part. That's interesting way of looking at this, and I like that. I think of this too when I think of all we've discussed so far. The word discipline comes to mind. The older or the more wise or the more experienced discipline the weaker or the younger of the two. And when you look at it from that perspective and you think of the ego and as you mentioned, consciousness, the ego in a sense doesn't think that it needs help. But when I think of the discipline perspective, from that perspective, it to me, it has to be, there has to be a point where this is voluntary, meaning that I note inside of me that there is something better or a better way of doing this, and I surrender. Being the ego, I surrender my consciousness, that thing that I think I thought I knew, and those experiences, and my desire for pleasure is being questioned or come under suspicion now that maybe there's something else that I see here. So I see it as a self-discipline type thing, but I also see, and I don't know how this connects, but something that the two sides have to, or the ego have to reach a point that it's willing to come under submission, and that's the part that I think is very interesting about this. But I see see what you're saying, and I just I just agree with what you're saying, and that's it. I'll stop right there because I think I have a question, but keep going, and I'll see if I can get to it. Just keep going.
Let me just enhance that supposition of what you just said. The ego has to be willing to come into submission by saying that along our path to wokeness, to being awakened, we have to come to the understanding that we have to put our ego under submission. We choose that. The ego thinks it controls the soul. It does. From a spiritual perspective, that the ego thinks that, it's all about me, myself. The ego protects the me, myself in this realm here. It's about me, myself, and I. Selfishness. I want what I want. I still want it. I might be a little bit restrained in how I go about getting it, but I want what I want. I want money. I want power. I want to impress others. I want. In other words, it's about it's the illusion of our real self. It's the illusion. Anything that's the illusion of the authentic, genuine, spiritual being that we are is based in ego. And the ego gives us the illusion that we're in control of everything, that I pull myself up by my own bootstraps. No, I don't need anybody else to do it. I got mine, you get yours, kind of thing. The ego can keep us in bondage to things like unforgiveness, to pride, to bitterness, all these kinds of things. It creates that illusion that I'm right to be mad at you. I'm right to I'm right not to forgive you for what you did to me. I'm right not to forgive you. All of that is the ego. But the other thing is that ego must be brought into submission. The ego thinks it's controlling the ego thinks it controls the soul. But the ego is to serve the soul. Understand, we're not talking about doing away with the ego. The ego is not bad in and of itself. And Ron, you said something, you said discipline. We need to discipline ourselves so that the ego understands that, I'm not in control of you. I'm here to serve you. The ego is there because it helps us relate spiritual things in this physical realm. But it must do it in servitude to the soul. So if you look at the soul as that experience often and the ego as what's being trained, then that's where the training occurs. And indeed, it's based on discipline. It's based on that soul oxen going to the right when I tell it to go to the right, and the ego has to follow. Or I'm the driver of the team. And when I indicate to the soul that I need to stop here, then I got to send that signal to the ego to stop. Or if that ego sends to pull right, when I want it to pull the other way, that kind of thing. That all of that takes the discipline of aligning the two, as I think Sheldon talked about earlier, so that they work together. But we have to clearly know which is the one that has the dominance, the influence, if you will, over the two. Comments about what I've just said? Other any additions? Get a sense of what I'm saying. Yes.
Good morning. This is Kathy, and
Hey,
I
Kath.
am loving this lesson. I am agreeing with everything you say that you're saying, because what you're describing is what we in the past have been told was dying to self, and not really understanding what that meant. Because in the beginning, our identity comes from our ego. Because when you're going off to college, when you're setting goals for yourself, or when you're going into life as an adult, whether you go to college or not, as an adult, you start defining from your ego the things that you think you should be able to accomplish. And you set markers in your life that by this age, I should have accomplished this. And then when you look at your life and you look back over your life, if you have not accomplished those things in life, your ego tells you that you have not been successful. So ego has been defining the decisions you made, the way you've been trying to live your life from the inception of understanding who you are. But what you're saying is now that we are beginning to see spiritually who we are, the thing that we are bringing into submission is that ego. And for lack of a better term, we are not actually killing the ego, because the ego has served a useful tool for us when we didn't understand who we are spiritually. But as you all are saying, we are bringing that into submission, bringing it into discipline, and understanding that I now am living out of my soul as opposed to my ego. So I just wanted to say, in the past, we've called that dying to self. But now we are understanding that really that is learning to just live out of your soul.
Thank you so much, Kathy. You always bring it into a tight, neat picture for us. I appreciate that.
She said,
Other comments?
Yeah. And Barbara, and everyone, as you were giving us, the scripture text, this morning in reference from Matthew, I was reading in the Aramaic light of the Gospel of Matthew. Then an example, it is Jesus in terms of, how he, shared, his example in terms of ego. It just says in here, Jesus had no palaces, temples, or sacred shrines or priestly systems. He preached and taught about God as a loving Father. Then it goes on to say, this God expected no sacrifice or gifts from worshipers. They could approach God with a simple prayer. And men and women were to be freed from the heavy burdens of traditions, dogmas, and misleading teachings. And when I just thought about this in terms of what Evelyn said earlier, in terms of, we are under commands, or we are under, laws that the system gives us. But, Jesus said that, if we come to him, our burdens, could be light if we just able to, again, just understand that it's simple, in terms of just being able to walk and talk with Jesus, just to listen to how he taught and how he, carried himself, at that time. I just wanted to share that thought.
Thank you, George. Others?
Yeah, I have.
Go ahead, Shel.
I've had a quite a few thoughts about all that has been said. As you brought in ego into focus and the other oxens and our soul. Um, the ego is concerned with I, as in I am an individual, as in I, the human being. And so when Kathy just now was talking about going to college and all the things that I'm going to do and how I'm going to be successful, even idea I'm going to find myself. From the, I guess, an elementary standpoint of that I'm going to find out myself is saying I'm going to find out who I am as an individual. And in many senses, what is meant, at least at the time, when people say that, to find out who I am as a human being. The ego is concerned with, like I said again, itself and its own identity, and therefore the pleasures of a sense serving itself. Itself is number one, and because of that, that's where the use of force comes in from, and the idea of always fighting, so to speak, because in the ego sense, nothing else matters, or at the very least, the ego is most important. So when it comes to serving the ego, if that needs to be done by force, that is what will automatically happen. When George just now mentioned Jesus and about not having palaces and all these other things, it was because Jesus was not living under a condition where he was trying to serve or establish himself as a human being. He needed no credit for these things. He didn't need to be held up on a pedestal, so to speak. And is why he always was saying that he gives glory to God, because the human recognition, so to speak, or to be established as a human, did not matter at all to him. And the last thought that I was thinking, well, one of the last thoughts, because I didn't hear everything, was the ego doesn't consider we, but is only concerned with I, whereas the soul sees and recognizes is beyond that individual I, so to speak. I think well, I'm done at the moment.
Thank you, Cheryl. That segues into my next question, unless somebody's got a comment. What do we do to decrease the ego's control of the soul so that it serves the soul? What do we do to decrease our ego's control of the soul? If this oxen, the ego is always going to be the immature oxen. I'm just tell you the moral of the story from my perspective. It's always going to be the immature oxen. It's always going to be out there trying to do its own thing. It's going to try to pull away and pull, even though they're yoked together. The ego's always going to try to take the soul, the other oxen, the soul, its way, the way it's going. What has to happen for us to control the ego so that it serves the soul? And let me tell you a little story before you give me some comments, because all of your comments are important to the context of describing the soul that controls the ego. One of the things I did a little reading about animals that are yoked, and I even read in the 1860s, et cetera, when the folk were going from Missouri out west toward Utah and those places out there, they used oxen Oxen were cheaper. Horses cost more. Horses were faster, but they cost more. An ox can pull. An ox can be up to 1,000 or more, up to 1,500 pounds, and it can pull equally its weight, etc. So it's a good laborer in terms of what it can do. And when you're training those oxen to work together, and that oxen seems like he doesn't want to do it right, after a while, the driver, whoever's driving those two, comes around to that oxen, looks him in the eye, literally looks him in the eye, and then goes back up and gives him a whop on his backside to show you're not in control, I'm in control. That's what the driver does. So that oxen begins to get the message that, I guess I'm not in control. I guess he's in control and I'm here to serve him. Well, what do we do to get our ego in control, to know that it serves us? We don't serve it. Ideas, comments, questions? That wasn't rhetorical, y'all, but if you don't have anything, I'll go on.
No, we talk ourselves. We either talk ourselves out of doing something by allowing our ego to to remain in charge, or we talk ourselves into doing what we know the right thing is. And in doing so, it's no different than looking the oxen in the eyes. And we let it know that the soul is in control. I kind of sort of equate the conversation between the soul and the ego as I would a conversation between the soul and the mind, because I see the mind as being the entity that the ego speaks through. I'm done.
Thank you.
I think along that lines of the mind being the entity that the ego speaks through, one way that we do begin to discipline it is being very conscious about what we feed the mind in terms of our studies, our day-to-day activities, like what are we feeding that ego?
And Regina, what we're feeding the soul.
I was going to say
so
that
we see the differences.
I was going to say that yeah, we have. First of all, we kind of have to recognize that there is the one and the other, because the ego can be all-consuming, for lack of a better word, because it is how we see ourselves, what we think of ourselves, and everything that we want to be within ourselves, in terms of a human experience. So it's kind of a hard thing to let go of, if you don't recognize that there is more to you than just the ego. So I think part of it is recognizing and understanding that there is more to the story.
Thank you. It's understanding, yes, that the more awakened you become, that's when you begin to understand more and more the relationship of the two, that you need both of them. However, one serves the other. there's sometimes things and circumstances in our lives that drive us to that place of silence. If that resonates, loss, whether it's of a marriage or loved one or status or title or home, whatever that loss is, can sometimes drive us to a place of silence, and we begin to internalize that. When that happens, that's the time that we can take what's perceived as something that's taken away from us. The ego would tell us, okay, you lost that. That takes away from who you are. You're not this anymore. That takes away from who you are. You're not in that position anymore. That takes away from who you are. But it drives us to the silence inside of ourselves. And if we've been feeding our souls as well, then that's the time we begin to take that silence as an opportunity for spiritual development, even more spiritual development. In other words, when we meditate and we get to that place of silence, we can still that chattering thought in our mind that tells us this or that. But silence can calm those problems that don't seem to have a solution, because we still that problem in our mind. Silence can calm or shut up that noise that seems to break our concentration, whatever it is. And so we can start there, in a sense, with stilling those things, closing them down, in a sense, in terms of what we begin to concentrate. Because, in silence, the ego is still. The ego is still in silence. When you close down the chatter, that's closing down the ego. When you close down the suppositions about how I'm going to solve this problem, that says how I am going to solve this problem, with the emphasis on the I. When you close that chatter down, that closes the ego down. So when you close down, and it's almost like you're emptying yourself. You're emptying yourself of that chatter. When you're closing it down, you're creating space, if you will. Once you empty yourself of all that noise that tells you what you oughta, coulda, woulda, shoulda done, and you close up all of that noise, you're open to receive. And that's when wisdom comes in, guys. That's when you can receive that insight that you didn't even think about before, because you had so much noise going on. You couldn't hear it before because there was so much chattering. You could not hear it before because there was so much judgment of yourself. The freedom in being yoked with a womb. And you notice I said a womb rather than the id and the soul being yoked. I'm talking about beyond the yoking of the soul and the id and the ego. The freedom in being yoked with Abun is that you don't have to do it all yourself. You don't have to. You don't have to move the earth by yourself, literally. It's done in tandem with Abun. And so when the answer to that problem that you wanted to solve, you get that insight, that inspiration that comes in you when you close down all this other chatter. It's just, oh, that's okay. That's wisdom. And I'm not saying it does it right then at the time that you're silenced, but it may come after you've had a night's sleep. It may come after you've been thinking about something else, and it just, quote unquote, pops into your head that way. Wisdom has that opportunity then to be part of who you are and you of it. And so I can't tell you the number of times when I've tried to do stuff on my own, out of my own intellect, and I could not come up with an answer. But when you tap into and connect with the wisdom of the universe, there are an infinite number of possibilities and possible solutions and possible ways to respond to something. Infinite. In my own intellect, I try to come up with, well, what's the one way I can do this? I free myself from that box of trying to do it by myself and come up with one idea that doesn't work. And I free myself in turn, I free myself from that so that I can be a vessel for all of the ideas, for all of the possibilities, for all of the solutions. And the very one that I need settles into my mind. I don't know how else to say that. It's just got to resonate with you guys. There is no word you can put around it. It just has to resonate. Go ahead, Pastor.
So if we, not if, but when we are able to see a circumstance or face an adversity and refrain from saying, I don't know how I'm going to handle this, refrain from saying that, and rather than say that, we approach it by saying, okay, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to approach this? In doing that, it automatically unites us with the energy of a boom and bring about the solving of that issue. However, if we say, how am I going to handle it, then it personalizes the adversity, and at that point, the ego begins to take over and determine how I'm going to deal with it. And it usually is not done. It just takes us to a deeper level of frustration or depression. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, sir. So all those thoughts that are kind of just create this traffic jam, the chatter in our mind, when we clear our mind of it, it allows wisdom, infinite wisdom, to answer the questions that we have, whatever they relate to. Just like a cup. Go ahead.
Ourselves in the community within, so that we can hear the voice.
Yeah. Just like a cup. You fill that cup with water, and then imagine a hole in the bottom of that cup. That cup no longer holds the water. However, and you can say, and you can see it that way. However, you can also see it that because that cup has a hole in the bottom of it, it can then an immeasurable amount of water can go through that cup, can flow through that cup. If you plug that hole up, the water, and you fill it, the cup can get full, and it can either get stale or then it runs over. But if the cup has a hole in it, the water continues to flow. It's like a vessel. It's like a channel. It's like a tube. It's like an opening for that. Wisdom is just like that. It can flow through an open mind, one that's kind of empty, and you closed off the chattering, you reduced the chattering. Wisdom is just like that. Because again, our thoughts and our thoughts have energy tied to them. And our thoughts are tied to emotions, which also have energy tied to them. And all of this energy can clutter up. It's like constipation of the mind. And when we clean out that stuff, that's when the purity of awareness of wisdom comes in, so that we begin to understand something and it evokes knowledge in a sense. Or it's like Pastor, you usually like to use this example of the water, a jar with sediment in it. It's like the sea. And if the sea is chaotic, it can stir up a lot of sediment from the bottom of it. But if that sea then calms down, the sediment doesn't mix with the water anymore. It settles down, and the muddiness goes away, and the cloudiness goes away, and then you can see the clear water that rises to the top. When we settle those shattering thoughts, our thoughts rise to the top, and wisdom impregnates them. That's when our thoughts are aligned with the divine. And when that happens, truth happens. That's what truth is. Truth is having access to just what we need, when we need it, how we need it. The truth that I need for any one situation may not be the truth you need for that particular situation you're in. But that's when the yoke is light then. Because it says that it doesn't matter how many issues arise, or how many circumstances, or how many conditions, or how many, whatever it is in our lives, when we allow wisdom to impregnate our thoughts, whatever we need, we have, and the burden gets light. So when we're yoked, in a sense, with our womb, we don't have to do all the work ourselves. We don't have to pull the heavy loads by ourselves, in a sense. It's a shared kind of thing, and the burden is light. And that's what Yeshua was talking about when he says, "My burden is my burden is light. My yoke is easy. My burden is light."
So Barbara, looking at it from that perspective, right? That's when the two becomes one.
Yes.
Indistinguishable.
My burden is its burden. My burden is its burden. Yes.
Right. So that's another way of. I was listening. I think like a couple of weeks ago when Catherine made the statement that I'm not a co-creator. I'm a creator. That in that sense, that speaks to that rather, that we are creating as one. I'm not a co-creator. Because without me, Abun could not do it. When without Abun, I could not do it. So there is no I, there is no one with Abun. It's one. It's the one that's up to two. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we think about Abun being capable of doing anything. No. If we are not cooperating, then Abun cannot do it. It has to be with our consent, our desire, with our desire. That is in itself the yoke that makes us one. So
it's sort of like, I love these examples of like with the birds, the geese that fly, and they fly in a V kind of formation. A number of you know this. But they fly, and then when the lead geese needs a rest, it falls back into formation, and another one takes the lead. But the issue is they, in working together, have this, I don't know if it's a centrifugal force or whatever you call it, whatever the word is, that when they're flying in formation, it's like they're pulled along by each other. so that they are not working as hard as they would be flapping their wings along. Or like when you've gotten behind an 18-wheeler that's going along and you're behind it, and you're not too close now, but you're just behind it enough. All you know is you just caught up within the force of that vehicle as it travels forward. You're pulled along. It's almost like it's almost effortless for your vehicle. That if you look at your gas tank, you use just gas for some reason too. So all of this is the same kind of thing. When we are doing it from a spiritual perspective and with a bloom, it makes everything easier, guys.
Can you mute your phone, please?
So my final thing is know the truth. Know the truth. Know the truth. The issue is not getting rid of the ego. You need the ego. The ego has served you. But understand that the ego needs to serve you. You don't need to serve the ego. You know that the ego is serving you when your soul is focused on humankind, not itself, others, not itself. Ego's about, as Sheldon said earlier, about self. You know that you're serving that the ego is serving you when your focus is outside of you. You know that the ego is serving you when you don't allow that guilt to come upon you because you didn't do things this way or that way. You know the ego is serving you, as I think Pastor you once said, you can't do anything unrighteous. Everything you do is right. So in other words, instead of second guessing ourselves about, well, could I have done it better this way or could I have done it, just accept that was the right way at that point in time for that particular circumstance. However it worked out. That's what it should have been. That's what it is. And then know the truth. Your possibilities are unlimited. So that we can be both woke and yoked. One does not exclude the other, if that resonates. And that's the truth. Any other thoughts, comments?
Yeah.
I have a.
Go ahead, Ron.
Go ahead, Sheldon. I'm sorry. Oh, you go ahead. Go ahead.
When going to a few examples that was given earlier today, and we talk about the idea of pausing and the meditation and things like that. Was thinking about the ego to illustrate it a little bit more. The ego is typically very loud. It acts immediately and is actually seeking to validate itself. So when Ron gave the example of the young lady and why was she fussing back with the guy, is because the guy made her feel like she was belittled or less than in some type of way. And so she needed to argue back to reassert herself, to validate herself. The example that ST gave that all of us have gone through and maybe even still going through in certain things, certainly in everyday life, with the idea of how could I have done this perfect or I messed up in terms of what I strived or initially wanted to do. That in ourselves or viewing ourselves as not validating ourselves in the way that we had originally wanted to. And it's the ego that is first loudly bringing that up or making us feel that way. That pause, so to speak, that stopping, that listening, is the same exact thing that you spoke about when the person who is driving the oxen goes and looks the oxen in the eye. The oxen is made to stop even for a moment of going against this and doing what it wants to do, and to pause and to go in line. The analogy that is kind of cool when you're thinking about it, though, is when that oxen, well, first of all, when the oxen tries to do what it wants to do, it takes far more energy and determination for the oxen to fight against the other oxen, as well as the driver, than it does for all the oxen to just work along together in unison. That work then, whether the oxen is going to participate or not, is actually easier from that standpoint. Because now you're not fighting how many other oxen and the driver that's up there. And going back to verse 29, when it says, I am quiet and I am mild, in a sense that is, when Jesus says that, he's also, and I think the literal and King James used the word meek. He's actually talking about more so that peace and not fighting, and that way is a lot easier. Yeah, I said the ego is very loud. But so metaphorically, when we pause and rest, meditate, and go in ease, we are going along with, when we say we're going with Abwum, we are going with the other oxen. And then also the idea of when we think about things, what do I have to do? We're essentially looking at the job and saying, how am I going to do this all by myself? And in that, you're also limiting it to me as an individual, not that of the whole collective of the oxen, so to speak. We're going to use that, going back to that analogy. And that I just wanted to point those things out. Yeah. Oh, and the yielding thing is more so not fighting anymore. What Jesus kept on talking about. It's not being in control by the ego. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Ron, you were going to say something?
Yes. This is kind of my summation and kind of my appreciation for what has been said today as well. I was 38 years old when I had a life-changing experience, and it pointed me to the place of looking and saying, who am I and why am I here? I remember the day I had that thought, why am I here? And what is this thing all about that we go through every day called life? And it set me on a journey. And some time later, when I moved to Spartanburg and the Creator surrounded me with people who were on a similar search with me, I start seeing changes how I see things, and even God moving me in a certain direction and giving me wisdom and understanding and that the appreciation for that. But here I am these number of years later. I'm 61 now, and these verses, not only have I been a part of these 3 verses before in a Bible study, a class, I've taught this, and never have I seen it the way I see it before. I mean, how I see it now. the way you and everybody has explained it. And I am in great appreciation for that because I feel lightened by this. This has been, to me, a mind-changing thing. And some of the things that you said, because, and I think one of the things Kathy said is, after all these years and all that the Creator has done for me, I did not realize that I was still controlled as much as I am by the ego. And some of the things Kathy said and that have beat me up over the years is, looking at myself and saying, here you are at this age, and you were supposed to have this, you're supposed to be doing that. You have this amount of education, but look at how much money you make. Look at where you live and all these things. But, the way you guys summed it up, and Sheldon said something that was just like, wow. I mean, he said, Jesus did not come to establish himself as a human being. And I was like, whoa, I like that. I had not seen it from that perspective. And so I was, I could relate to what ST was saying, because the ego is not just always, you think of it, I'm Superman. It doesn't always lead you in that place. It leads you to a place too of depression and feeling lonely because you have not reached the pinnacle that you think that you should have. So this has been freeing for me. And, it doesn't matter that it's taken 20-some odd years. I think I finally see this, and I see I see how to be free and to appreciate who I am. And I no longer, Barbara, want to have constipation of the mind. I like that. I'm not going to forget that. But I appreciate this. This is eye-opening to me. It's very simple, and it's not the first time we've talked about this. We've done it in other lessons in different ways, but today just kind of hit me at just the right place. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ron. But to everybody, just to remind you, this is only one way of seeing this truth. There are infinite possibilities that if we go back and look at these verses again, they can open up other avenues for us as well. That's what they're there to do. They're not there to limit us. And so just because we didn't see it quite this way before, it's meant for us to see it this way today. But it's meant for us to see it a different way at another point in time. So there is no end of knowledge and end of ways that it can be expressed and shown. Any other comments? Because that's about it for me today, for now.
I have sort of a question comment, but so we're basically saying then that when you yoke the ego with the soul, then that opens us up to spiritual wisdom that allows us to recognize ourselves, and in doing so, recognize that we are yoked with Abu.
Yes, but that was an example of the point the truth of the matter that the ego serves us. It doesn't control us. It serves us. And when we understand that, yes, we are open to understanding who we are, that we are Elohim, that the ego is there to serve us. So that was the point. Whatever you're yoked to, yoke can be perceived as something negative, but it can also be perceived as not negative. So that's the gist of it. You don't have to be yoked to it. You just have to come to the understanding that it serves you. You don't serve it.
Right. And I think we come to that understanding when it is yoked to the soul. Yes.
Yes. That's a way of saying it. Yes. Oh, that's the way that was what part of my supposition today. Who knows what my supposition will be tomorrow? As long as it's in pursuit of truth, or as long as it uncovers that truth that's already captured me.
Well, that just takes me back to what we talked about in Thomas. When in saying 22, when you make the two into one, then you enter into wisdom, you enter into the kingdom.
Yes. All right. I do appreciate the comments and the input from the teachers and the summations and all of that, because it adds so much more richness to the understanding. So thanks. As usual, guys, I was sure you would be there. So thanks. I appreciate it. If there's nothing else, Pastor, you got anything else?
I don't. I'm most appreciative to everyone for the input and the understanding, but no, I don't. So I guess, Barbara Jean, we pick up tomorrow.
Okay, so that is 12 o'clock, and I'll say enjoy the rest of your day.
And you do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, fam.
See you later.